Hi, I'm Scott at ediblemusic.com. If you are learning how to mix and seeking out some help, then you likely will hear the phrase to mix in context. But the problem with this is that the phrase itself needs context. It doesn't help a lot to receive some advice, but not to explain why or how to actually do it. Usually, when it's offered, it is given in opposition to mixing in solo, where you would solo up a track and add your processing there before unsoloing it, putting it back into the mix so that you can hear it with everything else. But knowing not to do that doesn't actually explain to you how to mix in context. So I want to help you out with that and actually to show you how to control the context of your mix, because instead of mixing in solo, if you just have all of the tracks going all at once, in fact, you're not really gaining context. It's just a big group of tracks, and it doesn't actually give you the answer about how to manage them, how to work through them. So if you're building context, then you'll be able to maintain control over your mix. You'll be able to control the context of your mix. Let me show you how to do that. If you were to start out just with your kick drum, then you would have a level for that, and you'd want to bring up the snares in context with them, so that the energy matches. And so you're not just listening to the snares becoming louder as you bring them up. Your ears are actually focused still on the kick drum, and you're bringing up the snares in context with the kick drum. And now you can bring in the rest of the drums as well. So even in the case of working with a group of tracks rather than the entirety of the project, you can start with one element and create context around it. And that way you will have this anchor element around which you can bring up all the others and balance them in relation to, in context with, that initial element. If you're mixing, then you might not start with drums. You might want to start with vocals instead. And then you might bring up the other elements around that. But one of the things that I teach when I give you the 5-day foundation series is to locate the anchor elements in your mix. Usually there'll be drums or vocals if your song has vocals. And then it might be guitars or it might be piano, depending upon the type of song that you're working with. But when you identify and locate what I call an anchor element, then that is the program element, the part of the song that you utilize in order to control the context of the mix that you build around it. So here we've got these two anchor elements in, and that's another thing that I recommend, is to have more than one so that even the anchor elements are being established in context with one another. And then you would bring up the other tracks in context with those. So once you have the anchor elements established, hopefully they're at a good level and you don't need to touch those faders anymore, because they're providing the guide for you to bring up and level out the rest of the mix. So here again, as I bring up the keys and the bass, I'm listening to them in relation to those anchor elements. And at the same time, it's useful to give yourself a second to become accustomed to the frequency content of that track that you're working on, because then you can contextualize that part of the mix among the others that would sit within the same frequency area. So the bass isn't really going to get in the way of the vocal. It's not going to get in the way very much with the keys, but you would want to make sure that it sits quite well with the drums, since they combine to produce the rhythm section. And this is something that I usually do, is if I solo something, I'll solo it with another part of the song so that I can still hear them in relation to each other. think those synths come up in the chorus. Another aspect of context that you will want to establish is the context of the genre that the song sits within. What do the drums or the vocals or the instruments usually sound like? There is usually quite a big difference between the kick drum in a dance track versus a punk song or a country song. And so even though you don't have to necessarily gear your mix precisely towards the reference tracks that you're going to use, it is really important to build for yourself a collection of reference tracks that you can utilize to contextualize the mixing decisions that you're making. And this is another thing that I talk about in the 5-Day Foundation for you, where the context that you establish is a matter of decision making. It's not just a matter of observation and having everything in there. I'm making concrete decisions about where to position the faders so that the song elements are balanced well in relation to the anchor elements. And then that will drive your decisions with EQ or compression or effects, but they're always moving forward, building context, but maintaining control at the same time. Now we can bring these synths in. And still being contextualized by those anchor elements. I don't want to drown those out because they're important to the song. This approach of mixing in context compels you to make your decisions with processing and effects by thinking about them in relation to other elements of the mix, which is really important to do. Try this out and use the 5-Day Foundation to see how it carries you through all the stages of your mixing, through EQ and compression and saturation and delay and all of your spatial effects as well. It will help you very much to maintain control over the context of your mix, and it'll get you better results too.